Good evening, and welcome to our Meet the Candidates Night that's sponsored by the West Seneca Central School District. My name is Elena Calla, and I'm the district's communications coordinator, as well as the MC for tonight's event. On behalf of our district and our Board of Education, I'd like to welcome our candidates and everyone in attendance, whether here in the auditorium tonight or watching on our live stream. We appreciate your interest in getting to know our candidates and making an informed vote on May 21st. As a side note, in regard to voting, know that the West Seneca has approximately 37,000 eligible voters, but we generally only bring about 2,000, give or take 500. So we need to see you at the polls. We'd love to see you, every parent of every child in our district, vote at the polls this year. Before I introduce the candidates, allow me to explain to you the structure of tonight's event. And we will try to wrap up by 8 o'clock. Each of our segments will be timed. Tammy Sugru, seated in front over here, will be operating our timer and gently cue our candidates when their time is up. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to provide an opening statement and 3 minutes to provide a closing statement. In between, they will be given a question. Everyone will get the same question. They're given 2 minutes each to answer. We'll start at the front of the line with the first question, and the second question will go to the second person, and so on, so that we're revolving that order. If time allows, we'll take some live questions from our audience. We have a few microphones set up for that purpose. And again, still with a 2-minute time limit on that. Now we have 6 candidates for this election. One is with us virtually, and one unfortunately was ill tonight and could not make it. Molly Dana will not be with us tonight. They are seated in the order that they will appear on the ballot, and we're happy to have everyone here. We have Elizabeth Gates. We have Justin Smith. Molly Dana will be third on the ballot, but she's not with us tonight. Jeremy Maloney after that. Marla Greenberg is on the monitor. And then we have Lorraine Barelich. So, without any further ado, I'd like you all to introduce yourselves. Please, Liz.
Okay. So I understand Tammy will give me the, no? Okay, thank you. Thank you to everyone for joining us this evening in person and remotely. I think the best way to introduce myself is to tell you more about who I am as a person, how I grew up, and the part of me that I often don't get to speak about on the board and as a community member. So what you don't know about me, or some of you may not, is that Liz Gates is the daughter of immigrant parents. My parents came to this country from Lebanon 2 years before I was born. They came here legally as immigrants, not refugees. My father's Armenian, my mother's Lebanese. My parents came to America with $15 in their pocket. They rented a house on Ryan Street in South Buffalo, and my father immediately began work at Bethlehem Steel. My father was an educated man in Lebanon, a math teacher, who speaks 3 languages fluently and ran the elections in his small country. For reference, Lebanon is about the size of Rhode Island. However, in America, his education was not acknowledged and deemed useless. Nevertheless, he was thankful for the work offered to him as a laborer and later as a truck driver. After a decade of working and saving, my family moved from South Buffalo to West Seneca, in the very home my mother still lives in today, and the home my father recently passed away on December 26th. I graduated from Northwood Elementary, West Middle, and West Senior. I am proud to be a lifelong resident of West Seneca. I have 3 boys in the school district. I have a Bachelor's of Science degree from the University of Buffalo in Finance and IT. I was also a certified business and CTE teacher. I have professional experience in finance, marketing, and technology. I am a current board member with 3 years of service to the board, the past 2 years as board president. I share all of this tonight to help people see the person behind the board member. and to hopefully help you all understand why I love West Seneca and why I sit on the Board of Education and why I'm seeking another term. This town allowed an immigrant family to feel welcomed and accepted. We were never ostracized or bullied. In fact, my friends, neighbors, and community members were interested in my culture and history. This is why I chose to raise my 3 kids here. To know me is to know that I was raised by dedicated, respectful, strong, ethical people who know the true value of freedom and the value of free education. So that is who I am at my core, and that is who I hope you see tonight. And I feel that my work on the board speaks for itself, and I hope you'll get to learn more about me tonight. And I think I'm done, right? 30 seconds? I'm done. Thank you. I had more, but I'll let it go.
Justin?
She gave some of my time.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming out. My name is Justin Smith. Sorry about that. I have lived in West Seneca since 2000. I have to say that I have, it's a great town, a great community, and so far, my daughter is a sophomore over at West, go West. And, right, yeah. And it has been a fantastic experience. It is a tough intro to follow, although I can say I have been to Lebanon. So a little bit about me. I served in the Marine Corps honorably before I went to Lebanon. After the Marine Corps, I got out and I got into IT, basically kind of like a engineer, and then worked my way up to management. So from there, I dipped my toes into international management, went over to Paris, lived there for about 4 years, then came back to the States. All the while, my wife stayed here in West Seneca, of course, so she's a real trooper. I am running for the board seats here because I think that what I've experienced the last couple of years is just generally a lack of transparency and a lack of just insight into how things are done. I think I can bring some insight into that and hopefully turn that around a little bit. In my professional career, budgets and reorganizations and shifting of labor and resources is something that I do all the time. My current budget is well into the $100 million, I think, right now. So managing a budget very similar to the West Seneca School District is not, anything I haven't done. As far as experience working with school districts, my daughter, previously to going to West Seneca, actually went to Queen of Heaven, which is also in West Seneca. And I was part of the HSG, which is kind of like the PTO, so I was president of the PTO. And under my supervision, I think we had one of the most profitable years during COVID, and really was able to bring the kids into school quicker than a lot of the other districts in the area. And generally, I'm running to try to, like I said, improve transparency, visibility, hopefully make the environment strong for our children, faculty, and staff. I don't need those 30 seconds. I'm good.
I'll take them.
See, we can shut the back door.
Very good. Mr. Maloney?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having us tonight. For those of you that are present and watching online that didn't have an opportunity to read my bio, I'm Jeremy Maloney. I've lived in West Seneca for the majority of my life. My wife and I are both graduates of West Seneca West. My son graduated from here at East. After graduating from high school, I served 2 years in the United States Army. Upon returning home, I worked full-time and went to college full-time. I've been employed by the West Seneca Police Department since 2013, and currently I hold the position of PBA President. I've also held the roles of Vice President and Health and Welfare Secretary. From 2005 to 2016, I volunteered as a head coach, assistant coach, and team manager for the Southtown Stars hockey organization. For the past 3 years, I've volunteered and helped out with the unified sports in the West Seneca School District. If I'm elected, I'm committed to serving the school community, bringing all stakeholders to the table, and making decisions that will create new opportunities for students without putting a bigger burden on taxpayers.
Thank you. Next on our monitor, we have Marla Greenberg.
Good evening. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. So thank you so much for everybody who came out today and for everybody who's watching online. I wish I could be there with you in person. I had a work trip that was scheduled before I decided to run, but thanks to the great IT staff at West Seneca, including Jessica and Pacer, I'm able to be here virtually with you, and I really appreciate this opportunity. So for those of you who don't know, my name is Marla Greenberg, and I live in the district with my husband and our son, who is an elementary school-aged student. And I currently work for a Fortune 100 financial institution. I've worked in the financial sector for most of my career, which spans about 20 years. I've worked in both the public and private sector. I've worked in both houses of Congress, both in the House and in the United States Senate, both in Washington, D.C., and actually in Buffalo, New York, where I led constituent services for 4 counties across Western New York. I've also served on boards before, and if elected, I am ready to hit the ground running. So I'm running for a variety of reasons. One, and first and foremost, public education made me who I am today. And my son is in public education. My husband went through public education. And public education is super important to everybody in the district. And so making sure that our schools are the most that they can be is the most important thing. Additionally, I'm also running to bring some additional transparency to the board and its operations. As I mentioned, I've been working in the financial services industry for in a variety of capacities for about 20 years. And as part of my daily job, I am responsible for distilling very complex subject matters into easily understandable storylines for various audiences. And I think that is something that's really important to the board. And I would work to bring that. We have a great opportunity now as a board and as a district. We have a new superintendent, and what I would do is I would hit the ground running to help bring not just transparency, but to help bring to build a new relationship, a very strong relationship with Dr. Kruger. And if elected, I look forward to serving in that capacity.
Thank you, Mrs. Greenberg. Lorian Barelitz.
Thank you. Frederick Douglass once said, "It is easier to build strong children than to repair broken men." As a mom, a nurse, a Girl Scout leader, and a friend of the community, I have seen firsthand the challenges that our students and the families of West Seneca face. Last year, I felt called to run for the board, to be a voice for the voiceless, and to stand for the health and safety of all students. Those reasons continue to pour into this race as we, the parents, the students, the taxpayers, the faculty, and the staff, have been muted by the actions of the current board, voiceless. I think there were opportunities available that could have helped support our teachers, faculty, and staff in better ways, that they can help our kids grow and dream while learning foundational skills. Cutting funding doesn't address the real issues that our schools are faced with, and that's increased fighting, bullying, issues with racism, and mental health. As a nurse, and as a mom, and as a leader, and a caregiver for my daughter's friends, we can't sit back silently and watch this happen. We are losing additional eyes that could care for them and bring things to light. That is why I'm running, that's why I'm here. I'm a strong advocate for public education. I'm probably the only one who is not originally from West Seneca, and therefore I'm not married to buildings. I believe that restructuring needs to happen for our students. My daughter and her friends were among the last of those who, before they got to middle school, went to 4 different schools because of short-sightedness. As a nurse, I don't believe in Band-Aid solutions, and I think that's what's been happening ever since I moved here. I'm originally from Erie, Pennsylvania. I went to Harbor Creek High School, just down the lake, and as a graduate, my award at graduation was for all-around activities. That is something that West Seneca is at stake for losing, all of the extra additional activities that our students come to school for. Sadly, it's not arithmetic and reading and writing. It's those things that build their core and that create them to be the citizens that we want them to be. Thank you.
Thank you. Because the first question tonight, and these questions, for your information, came in on our website through a survey that we sent out, They're not all exactly the questions. If they started with a long statement, I winnowed that down, and some of the questions are consolidated. But because the first one involves the board's role in working with the superintendent, I would like to take this moment to introduce to you Dr. Lisa Kruger, who is the superintendent that this board will be working with. Dr. Kruger will be sworn in on July 1st. She'll be sworn in on July 1st, but she's going to spend a lot of time in the next few weeks in our schools getting to know people before they leave for the summer, which is wonderful. So question number 1, that's you first, Mrs. Gates.
Okay.
Understanding that the board is a governance body and also policymakers who hire but one person, that being the superintendent, what experience do you have in recognizing the right candidate for high-level roles? Because you will need to approve recommendations that come from the superintendent.
What experience do I have in high-level roles? Repeat the second part.
What experience, do you have in recognizing the right candidate for high-level roles? So the superintendent will pose different people to you.
Okay. All right, well, I can speak to my experience on the board. I can speak to my experience in the private sector. And those two, I've been working. I was a teacher. I did not have the opportunity to interview then, but you do connect with kids and you do get a gut instinct about people, which I've always found to be something that I'm born with. I've had the opportunity to interview people in my field in marketing and IT mostly, and then once again in my husband's software company. So, and also interviewing the superintendent candidates. A lot of it, I think, is not just the right answers, but also in an interview, just getting that gut feeling that this person is right for the district. And seeing their interactions with members of an interview committee is also extremely important. How they answer the questions, is it just a verbatim response, or is it well thought out? Are they listening to learn? Are they listening to, answer a question? So I would say I have experience, but sitting on this board and getting the recommendations from our superintendent to approve personnel, if I trust in our superintendent, then I know that he or she has done the job. And they have already done the work for us. And the recommendation to the board should come with maybe a few questions, but we should have that trusting relationship with our superintendent that they are picking the right people for our district. So I delegate that authority to the superintendent, but because of the trusting relationship, but I have had experience in the past. I hope that answers the question. It was kind of complex.
It was a well-rounded answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
And
I tried.
anyone who would like the question repeated before I get to them, please just let me know. So, Mr. Smith?
Okay. So I have a lot of experience interviewing and hiring candidates directly. I also have a lot of experience with working with my staff and my managers or directors I've had that has recommended to me folks I should hire. I do believe in trust, but I also believe in trust with verify. So I do apologize, but I will not be somebody that just simply accepts everything at face value. I probably will be asking additional questions into how the process went. What did the other candidates look like? Well, I mean, like their qualifications in particular. What other options do we have? Is this person really the best person? And then, have more of a conversation around that process. And then over time, hopefully that can develop into more of a faster process. But that's my approach to it.
Very good. Mr. Maloney?
The majority of my interviewing would not be people that we would be looking to hire. However,
It would make things interesting.
through my training and experience, that's something we do all the time. We interview people, and we got to kind of read between the lines and see if they're being truthful. And that's something we pick up, different cues people give us, and it's easy for anybody to give you the right answer. But you have to be able to see between that and make sure they're being honest and it is the correct person you want.
Very good. Mrs. Barrow? Oh, I'm sorry. Mrs. Greenberg.
Thank you. So I actually have a good amount of experience in hiring teams, and I actually lead a team right now of about 15 people. So I have, interviewed a variety of different candidates. I know the types of questions to ask and how to understand how they've demonstrated results. So I also should mention I'm an attorney, so I listen very closely to what people say. I understand what questions to ask of them. And in this particular situation, I think the most important thing is to sit down with Dr. Kruger and to understand what is her vision. What type of people does she want to hire for what positions? And what is her vision for the district? And what type of candidates is she looking for? And then in discussing the candidates with her, I would ask questions not just about their qualifications, but and not just how they've answered questions, but what results have they been able to demonstrate and how have they been able to demonstrate those results in the past to be an indicator of future success. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Mrs. Bartlett?
Thank you. So I do have some experience with interviewing. I do serve on a leadership team in my current role. I lead a team of nurse case managers and trainers. And my present company, we're really big on high-performing teams. And it's not just a concept, but it's really a truth of transparency, accountability. There's 10 tenets. And I think all of those play highly to this role and to hiring anyone. So you can't have trust first without, like you said, trust and validate on areas that you need to. But you need to listen to what they're saying and what they're not saying. That, I think, is key here. Core values are super important when you're looking at what is West Seneca, what is our mission, our vision, and what are we looking to move forward to not repeat the past.
Very good. This next question comes from a parent of 3 children in the district. It borders on the philosophical more than operational because they're policymakers. But so the parent asked, how will we address student problems in terms of today's morals and values? And 3 key points that he mentioned were depression, identity issues, and bullying. And we'll start with you, Mr. Smith.
Oh, man, I thought
Yeah, it's a big one.
mixed it all up. Yeah, so let me tell you, if you're online, you're missing these lights. They are just cooking us alive. But anyways, that is a great question. And I can say as a parent and a father to a daughter that's actually been through all 3 of those, they are kind of near and dear to my to my heart here. So I absolutely think when we hear policy, and I for folks that attend the school board meetings, I'm usually there. If not, I watch them online, and the public comment section when folks get up and talk. At least this last board meeting was kind of a tearjerker, if you will. There was at least 2 of them where they absolutely, concerns with bullying and transgender and just a slew of other topics that popped up. And I think that as policymakers, those are items that we should be working with the superintendent with, to take the voice of the community, the student body, and the faculty to say, hey, how can we do better here? What are some other options that we can be looking at? As well as a lot of, I work in corporate America, so I am exposed to a lot of diversity, inclusion training, and sensitivity training. So I think a lot of those elements are items that could be brought into, and I do see some of them in the student body, but I think there are items that we could build a little bit more upon.
Very good. Mr. Maloney?
Oh, you want to just read that one?
Sure. So how will you address student problems in terms of today's morals and values? And the 3 bullets that were given were depression, identity issues, and bullying.
So I believe on most of these, there's already policies in place as well as laws that regulate many of them. But it has to be almost like a fluid thing. So as we see changes, as we're having concerns in the schools, we have to be willing to readdress policies and bring multiple people to the table to address these issues and hear voices of everybody. You can't just make a decision as a few people in a room. You have to have the people that are affected by this on a daily basis part of that discussion. And that's how I feel the board should address the policies.
Thank you. Mrs. Greenberg, same question.
Thank you. So I should also mention I'm an attorney, and I'm actually a privacy attorney by trade, so I work with technology on a daily basis. And technology has an unimaginable amount of positive impacts that it can have on our society and on our children. We think back to the pandemic. We were able to continue learning through Zoom. There are obviously downsides to it, which is what the question is getting at. But there were also really great benefits. My son takes guitar lessons actually virtually, which is great from a guitar teacher located in Silver Spring, Maryland. So there are really great aspects to technology. But, with great power comes great responsibility, to quote Spider-Man. And it really is an important conversation that we need to have as parents to be able to address some of the isolation that comes with the use of technology. And I think that to Justin's point, that at the last board meeting, it was very difficult to listen to some of the bullying that had taken place, leveraging technology. And one of the parents had actually asked the board to be able to address this through policies. And that is something that is really important to do, to make sure that the board is looking at policies, making sure that they're updated to reflect technology and that they're keeping pace with the problems and issues that parents and students are actually facing. So as a board member, that's something that I would look very closely at, and I would also work with Dr. Kruger and the rest of the administration to make sure that we got that right.
Wonderful. Mrs. Berelich?
Thank you. That's actually a really great question, which ties into many things I've already said tonight. I said it last year, I'll say it numerous times forever. It takes a village to raise these kids, and I stand by that. And so first and foremost, I challenge every single one of you in this room, if you're not part of a group or an organization, or if your minivan isn't full of children that you can pour into them, that's where it starts. As a nurse in my current field, I work in the self-funded insurance field, and in the role that I have, I'm speaking with many districts, and we're talking about where their high costs come from and what is the drivers of their costs. It is mental health, it is depression, and it is anxiety in their dependence, which is our children. Identity issues play into that. My first career is in theater. I didn't realize until I was out of it that that was a safe haven for many of my friends who otherwise would not be here to this day. That's because we had extracurricular activities, we had those extras, we had those safe spaces, we had those teachers, we had the faculty that could do that and that could pour into us. So again, if you eliminate those things, it's affecting the children, it's affecting their livelihood. Bullying. Again, where's the eyes in the hallway? Where are the teachers and the faculty? It could be a cafeteria worker, it could be a custodian. Are we giving them the authority and the autonomy? And thank you, as an SRO, thank you for your service and everything that you're seeing right now. I cannot even begin to imagine. And so yes, policies need to be worked on and supported, and thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Gates, would you like the question again?
No, I wrote down notes, so I understand. So I think that addressing the issues, the student values, and the identity, depression, social, emotional anxiety, I think that's all about how do you support diversity. Let's start with hiring employees who are from the same background, race, and religion of the growing population of students who we have. Review our policies, our code of conduct. Review disaggregated data to identify trends in student performance and suspensions and absences and those who need social emotional supports. That's where we begin. Find ways to engage with the families. I think we've made great progress this year, but I think there's more to do. For example, it was brought up our board meeting. I would like the members, the people sitting at this table, and also the members of this community to know that I participated in the New York State School Board's Artificial Intelligence webinar. And through that webinar, I received two updated policies for our student code of conduct and for artificial intelligence. In addition, we have looked into our transgender bathroom policies and have sought policies from other districts to compare them to ours, to update them, to make them fair and equitable for everybody. So what you hear people saying about at the board does take action on that. So I would like everyone to be aware that I spent my time learning about it, and I've invited those parents to come sit at the table with me and the superintendent to go over the policies for artificial intelligence and transgender. So thank you.
Very good, thank you. We'll start this next question with Mr. Maloney. Now we're getting into dollars and cents a little bit. Explain your understanding of public school funding and say what you believe specifically caused this year's deficit. What might you have done differently to manage balancing this year's budget?
Well, I feel this year's budget deficit didn't just happen overnight. It was something a long time coming, and I would have held accountable the individuals that said they had a plan in place and the ones that are in control of the budget, because this, like I said, is not something that occurred overnight, and those actions needed to be taken. Instead of starting at the bottom, it should have started at the top.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Greenberg?
Yeah, thank you. Similarly, I agree that this isn't something that came upon us that in a way that we weren't aware of. I think that most importantly, you have to take a look at the numbers, but you have to engage in creative problem solving, and you have to make sure that you bring all key stakeholders to the table. That includes teachers, it includes other school workers, it includes parents, and other community members as well, to make sure that you're taking a very close look at where the deficits are and making sure that you're making the right type of trade-offs, and having those discussions early on and being as transparent as possible to make sure that there are no surprises at the end of the day. And so that is something that is really important to me, and I would bring to the board.
Very good. Mrs. Berlich?
Yeah, I agree. This was not an overnight surprise as it was to the community, to the board. It's been happening year after year. Transparency is going to be key. And the biggest piece was bringing all of the stakeholders to the table. So the fact that efficiencies weren't able to be identified by the stakeholders whose very livelihoods depended on those decisions is what I would bring to the board.
Thank you. Mrs. Gates?
Yeah, can I ask the question again?
Sure.
Because I believe there were two parts.
It's explain your understanding of public school funding,
Okay.
first of all, and say what you believe specifically created this year's deficit and what might you have done differently to manage this year's budget.
Okay, so I don't think anybody explained what public school funding is, so I'm going to take advantage of that. It's how schools are funded. 50% through taxes, approximately, I don't want to say 50. 47% through taxes, 47% through state aid. We also get money through the federal government, about 3%. Okay, Erie County gives us some money through sales tax. So that is how public school is funded, by raising the tax levy and counting on the state to provide us with full foundation aid, which they did, and then they scaled back. So we didn't get $600,000 that we were supposed to get from the state this year. Okay, nobody addressed that. Also, yes, this did not happen overnight. There was overhiring done. We were aware of that. COVID funding came in for 3 years. All that money was spent to hire, to put faces in front of children. Why? Probably because we were remote for 6 months. We were the longest school district to stay remote. So maybe it was to make sure we had a lot of students in front of. I don't know the reasoning behind it. That was my first year on the board. Did we sound the alarm? Over and over and over again. If you watched our meetings, you will see that we sounded the alarm over and over again. And frankly, we put in directives to make sure that the hiring stopped or was sustainable. We were told it was supposed to be absorbed into the budget. It was not. Special education costs soared, transportation costs soared, and we were left with a little bit of money that we needed from the state. So, was this something that we enjoyed doing? Absolutely not. It was gut-wrenching. But we had to make the hard decision for the long-term financial stability of the district. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Smith.
Geez, so much stuff is already covered. So that is absolutely how the school is funded, so I don't really have to revisit that. But as far as how we got here and where we're at right now, I do absolutely agree that, and I have heard it at some of the other school boards, specifically last year, where they, questions are coming up, these new positions, can we absorb these, can we not? And there was a lot of yes, but on the flip side, I think that's where that trust and verify kind of comes in, is going back to the superintendent and saying, hey, show me how this works, show me how we can make this, these positions applicable to the budget and, for longevity. I also think, that was a great point that Elizabeth touched on in regards to COVID funding. That was huge, but at what point did the board say, hey, you know what, we're back in school, maybe we should be looking at those positions that were added specifically for that need to try to scale those back or use them for a different purpose to try to absorb some of that. I can say in my job, I have a set amount of money I get to work with, and I usually have to plan what happens if that money doesn't occur. So I always have a contingency and another contingency to that budget. And I think going back to the superintendent to say, hey, you know what, I'm not just going to accept this contingency budget. I want to see another couple ways that this will work and how we can make this fit and how is this all applicable. As well as we heard the union's representatives stand up at the school board meeting saying that they had a lot of ideas of how they can adjust the budget and stuff. And there was never anything else that we heard back from the current superintendent on how is that even applicable. So just overall, just kind of disappointed in the state that we're at right now.
Okay, very good. We're on to our next question, and it plays into the same idea, but looking forward. So West Seneca has one of the highest school taxes in Western New York. How would you mitigate raising taxes while maintaining good rankings for our schools? How do we go forward?
That's a question for me to start.
Yes, I'm sorry, Mrs. Greenberg, that is you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's a great question. So first, we are stewards of the taxpayers' money. Well, the school board is stewards of the taxpayers' money, in part, at least for a certain portion of it. And, you have to balance the need for quality education, making sure that the district is keeping pace with other districts and being able to provide high quality services with, having the lowest cost, right? And so that is something that I would look very closely at. And I think in part, one of the most important components is explainability and making sure that, it goes back to what we're talking about with transparency, problem solving, communication, understanding, what the issues are, what the trade-offs are, making sure you have the right stakeholders in the room, challenging people to make sure that you have the right information, and looking at it from all angles. And then also making sure that you're balancing that and also being able to explain it in easily understandable terms to a variety of different stakeholders and groups. And at the end of the day, that's something that you have to be able to balance those two things: high education, high quality education, with return on investment and lower costs.
Very good. Mrs. Barelich, same question.
Thank you. It's an interesting challenge to raise or maintain the rankings of students. I think we have some of the best teachers here in the district, and they're often met with apathy from parents and from the students. So the ranking is a very difficult one to answer when it's out of their control. As far as keeping taxes down, communication, transparency, understanding what that is used for, but namely from the top down, from administration. Everything that has come out on the budget that talks about administration, and if the vote doesn't pass for the budget, that administration cuts will happen. They're not talking about administration in the office. They're talking about programming. So transparency needs to be had about what that cut actually means. And again, I encourage everyone who's watching and listening to be the village, because again, unless we are pouring into the children of our community, the teachers can have the perfect plan, the perfect curriculum, but we're asking them to be everything. We're asking them to be teachers. We're asking them to now be the print shop. We're asking them to be counselors. We're asking them to be everything. And it's time for us to step up.
Mrs. Gates.
Can you repeat the question? I
Sure.
believe it was two parts again.
We have one of the highest school taxes in Western New York, so that's
Okay.
a statement.
Okay.
How would you mitigate raising taxes while maintaining rankings for our students, good rankings for our students?
Maintaining good rankings, so they're saying that there's.
We're doing, the kids are great.
Okay, I feel like that's a two-part question.
Yeah.
So let's see if my 3 minutes will be up. All right, so I would like to note that, 2 minutes, okay.
Took a minute away.
I did. I would like to note that I pay very high taxes on my home. So I agree with the sentiment about having high taxes. I have publicly stated that I would like to give the taxpayers a break. How we do that without cutting programming is the hard work. Okay, our next leader will have to work with the business office, but she will need the support of the board and all the staff to make that happen. As a board member, I hope to have time to advocate with our local legislators to fully fund foundation aid so that we don't have to take so much money from the taxpayers. Our current governor is cutting more aid from us this year rather than reevaluating the formula to account for inflation and special education costs and transportation costs. She's going to reevaluate the formula based on enrollment. So our enrollment has gone down. If that happens, if she takes more money back away from the school district and foundation aid, we will have to raise taxes again, or we will have to cut programming. Now I want to address a comment made by somebody here on this board. We did not cut programming through this budget. We did not. The Learning Labs was a COVID-funded initiative that was there for 3 years. We did not cut any programming. All the AIS supports are there, all the music programming in there, all the art programs are there, so none of that was cut. I would just like to address that. Regarding rankings, do I have time to talk about rankings? I have 30 seconds. I mean, rankings are a whole different world. And this question keeps coming up, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this, but folks don't realize that rankings are directly tied to gross income wealth. So we are a first-ring suburb. 10 seconds? All right, I'm going to leave it at that because I can really go on this one. I hope there's another one for me.
We'll catch up with you.
Okay, maybe it'll be my closing statement.
Mr. Smith?
Can I hear the question again?
Sure. West Seneca has one of the highest school taxes in Western New York. How would you mitigate raising taxes while maintaining good rankings for our schools?
Sure. I guess, do we? I can think of at least 6 other towns that surpass our taxes for what we pay, but that's not to say they're cheap. Actually, I haven't always lived in the district or West Seneca. Like I said, I moved here in 2000, and I can say pretty much every year I've lived here, I think we approved the school budget, and pretty much every year it's been a raise. So that's in taxes. And I'm a realist. I do understand that, for the cost of everything, it keeps going up, so that means taxes do have to also kind of go up too. But how much they go up and why are they going up, I think absolutely is key. I think some of the comments that were raised earlier around transparency, why we're doing things, what are the other options, engaging in those discussions to say, hey, is there ways we can mitigate these with grants or other opportunities out there for some of the co-oping with other districts or whatnot. So, yeah, taxes are absolutely a concern for me because I pay them. I would love to try to keep them more moderate if there's ever a way to, try to keep them flat or try to control raising them. But I think keeping the programs, keeping our students engaged, and providing the best education is probably one of the primary concerns for the board. So.
Thank you. Mr. Maloney?
I would say you would first have to start out with going through the budget line by line and then consulting with, so to speak, department heads to get their ideas on where we could trim certain expenditures. And then from there, you need to bring the unions to the table, because obviously we don't want to violate a contract, which is going to then create more money through grievances, and it's kind of a negative effect. But there are some people out there that think unions are the things costing us all this money. But believe it or not, I'm a union head, and I've been to the table with the town and the chief, and solutions we came up with may have been beneficial for us in the moment, but long-term, it's beneficial to the taxpayers. So there's no reason why the school district can't do the same.
Thank you. Mrs. Greenberg, you started with that question, right? Yeah, okay, thank you. I fell asleep for a minute. So this next question, we need a little levity. This is heavy, guys.
I'm trying here. I'm trying.
Yeah, this next question kind of brings some of the last two questions home, but it is simply, what is your vision regarding redistricting? And we'll start with you, Mrs. Barlich.
That's a great one for me. So because I'm not from West Seneca originally, I'm not married to the buildings. I have seen my daughter go from Northwood for kindergarten to Winchester, to home, to Winchester Potters, of which there wasn't a lot of transparency with a lot of that. And I knew from the day we bought our house, this doesn't make any sense. Why aren't we redistricting? I was told at that time it was a 4-letter word. It's time to say it. It needs to happen. There are students, that's my understanding, that don't fit in classrooms. So just because there's less teachers and we're going to say bigger classrooms, do the walls magically change? I don't know where that fell off of the agenda. I've been watching meetings, been attending them. All of a sudden, it's no longer on the agenda, and the community is not aware of what's happening with redistricting after kind of the eruption of what happened with the original idea. I've sat on the informational committees on what to do with that. It has to happen, and you have to bring the constituents to the table so that the children are not hopping around. My daughter was the group where at least they kept the same kids that would go to the same school together so that they weren't missing their friends. The year after that, they did not. So if we are taking into account the students and development of the youngest of our children, they cannot handle that again. And that is what I'm fighting for. I am not the enemy of anyone on this table right here. I'm fighting for our children. And the anxiety that was created in those kids by Band-Aid solutions being short-sighted cannot happen again. This needs to be thoughtfully done, and it needs to happen.
Thank you. Mrs. Gates.
Yeah. So the question was,
What's your vision regarding redistricting?
So, I don't have a specific vision for redistricting, because I do believe it to be a process that needs to bring in all stakeholders. We have had 3 redistricting committees in this district, starting in 2014 with the 21st Century Commission. They brought solutions to the board. Those solutions were rejected. Another redistricting committee was put together by 2 former board members. That group was in isolation. It was just in community members. They presented to the board. We formed another redistricting committee under Matt Bystrek's leadership. That committee was excellent. It involved there were 40 people. They were all West Seneca residents. There were principals, there were teachers, CSEA members, people from every bargaining unit, and parents. That committee put together some suggestions. One of those was presented to the board, just one of many, many different configuration options. Redistricting has not disappeared. It has been tabled. And we did state that at a board meeting. It's been tabled because we had the board had the work to do of finding the next superintendent, and we could not take on another humongous task like that. So the work needs to be picked up by the board moving forward and this next superintendent. So my vision is that everyone's back at the table, coming up with various options and presenting it to the community.
Thank you. Mr. Smith?
Yeah, I think that's a great keystone for transparency. I can say that, I've said in the school board meetings for review of, I think it was a single plan, and they did talk about all the other plans, but they never really went into any detail about one of the pros and cons or anything else along those lines. And I think one of the big missing bodies as part of that, which I was really moved when they stood up and talked, was the students. Nobody asked the students what they thought. And they're the ones going to school. And I think earlier on we were asked about, the impact of bullying and some of the philosophical impacts affecting our students. I think absolutely suddenly being, redistricted into another building, another group of, students and faculty and everything else can be very traumatic on children. So I think, my vision for that, one of the findings and stuff that came out of there was about how our student population is decreasing. I think there are a lot of opportunities we can do, interim trailers. I've been at plenty of colleges or they're learning institutions where they have temporary education facilities brought in to, when there's a population ramp up, and then when there's a decrease, they pull them out. So I think there's a lot of opportunities we can look at for that. I think that redistricting should absolutely be fired back up and be looked at. So.
Okay, Mr. Maloney.
I would say my vision would be, I would pick up where we left off, but I think what we should do is in reverse. So I think it should have started with that forum as far as input from the students, the community, and then from there decide where we go with a committee and how large it should be, and also reach out to other districts that have redistricted and see what has worked, what hasn't worked, and the end goal though needs to be the future. It can't be, okay, this is going to fix us for 3, 5, 7 years. It's something that has to be long-term. So that's my vision for redistricting.
Thank you. Mrs. Greenberg.
Thank you. Well, first and foremost, you have to think about what's right for the students and the children in the district. Education needs to be fair and it needs to be equitable, and every child deserves that. It's table stakes for our district. And so we need to look at what to do best by our students and our children. And to do that, we are not unique. We are not the only district that has faced the possibility of redistricting. And so you need to have, again, goes back to transparency, creative problem solving, making sure you're involving the right stakeholders. You're looking at all available options and evaluating them objectively and asking the right questions of all of the stakeholders, of our students, our teachers, others who work in the schools, the taxpayers, our other community members, to understand what is the best option, which I would imagine would probably result in somewhat of a phased approach, even if it is done as a permanent solution. It's something that you want to make sure that it's done right and that it is done, in a fair and equitable manner.
Very good. So, what order are we? Did you started? You started it. Yes. So, I'm sorry, Mrs. Verelich.
Did she? I already
Pardon?
started that one.
You did start
yeah.
that
Oh,
one. I should stop looking at these things and just pay attention. So then the next question, and we start with you this time. We're back to the front of the line again. How will you acknowledge and support cultural and religious diversity among our community?
Okay, so I think I addressed this in the other question where we talked about student values. How do we support diversity? I will say it again. We bring in people, we hire people in the district who look like the children in front of them. And our body of students is growing in that area. I think last I checked, the percentage is 80% white, and then the rest were from very diverse. But you have to remember, I'm Middle Eastern. We're considered white, so I think that number is a little bit skewed. I would say check your policies, your code of conduct. Keep an eye on the data. Keep an eye on suspension data and see if there's any bias there, and adjust your code of conduct, and build little communities within your schools, which I've seen happen in the elementary schools. I've seen just such beautiful things where they're celebrating diversity, they're celebrating a different group every month. I think to continue on that work, and I think also, like I said about hiring, I think it's important to bring diverse people in, even as speakers. if you can't find the staff, because staff is hard to find, and we are, we had to lay off a bunch of people, so we certainly aren't going to start hiring. So I feel like that's an important area. Turn it over to you, Justin.
Sure.
Good, thank you.
Yeah, diversity is absolutely something that we celebrated. I can say, most people have heard of the golden rule, and, I always tell my daughter, think about the platinum rule, and that's, not necessarily treating people how you want to be treated, but treat them how they want to be treated. And I think awareness programs, there's a lot of great cultural programs that are already happening in the school district that I love to see. I think opportunities to build upon those are fantastic. I like the idea of bringing in outside speakers, not necessarily liking the idea of the hiring. I think we should always hire the best person. So I don't think race or anything else should fit into that. I think it's you hire the person that does the job the best way, and that's what I support. But as far as the children, I think we look for those opportunities probably, and I think there's already student focus groups in a lot of these areas, maybe capitalize on them to try to get some of the voices of how they'd like to see change and try to build programs around that. That's fine.
Okay, Mr. Maloney.
As far as supporting it, I honestly, if you spend any time in any of the schools, I would just say, just push them to continue what they're doing every day, because there's always something going on in the schools. They're always recognizing different groups, having different functions, and it's actually great to see. And as far as that aspect, I would say just continue what we're doing, and we're doing a great job at that. As far as hiring process, yeah, I would agree with Justin. I would say you got to hire the best candidate.
Very good. Mrs. Greenberg?
Yeah, thank you. I think diversity, inclusion, belonging is extremely important. Diversity enriches education, and learning about different subject matters and from different perspectives and from people who look different from you enriches all of us. And so I would look across our programs comprehensively to understand where we can have enhancements. And I will say, at the last board meeting, I think there was a student report that went into the Cultural Diversity Fair, and it was really a great program, and it was really great to see diversity celebrated in such a real and wholesome way in the schools. And so I would look comprehensively across our programs to see where we can enhance those opportunities.
Very good. Mrs. Berlich?
Thank you. So how do we support cultural diversity and religious diversity? It's by celebrating and showing up for the kids. But most important, how do we support it is by we listen to what they say. Unfortunately, I mentioned earlier that racism is a problem in this district. So if you're not aware of it, speak to your kids. They'll tell you stories. They'll tell you words. Listen to them. It needs to be addressed. Code of conduct policies need to be addressed. And administration needs to be given the authority, the autonomy to carry that out. Again, thank you to the SROs. You're the front lines of it. I think the current temperature of our community is going to be concerned when it comes to hiring a diverse population. We have to build trust, first of all, to recruit from the labor pool, let alone from a diverse labor pool, knowing that West Seneca has cut so many positions. So in a few years, when retirement increases and when those jobs need to come back, if we want them to be the ones that are applying for these roles, we have to build trust.
Very good. Thank you. So we're on to our next question now, and we're going to start with Mr. Smith this time. Some candidates, this is a statement and then a question. Some candidates were endorsed by WISTA and the CSEA unions in our district. How would it impact your objectivity when negotiating contracts or developing a budget?
I tried. So I met with both the unions, and I can say that great leadership bodies. I was really impressed with both of the meetings, and I can say that, and it's exactly why I told them that I would love their endorsement, but if I didn't get it, that's not going to change how I plan to interact with them. I think that there's a lot of missed opportunities to bring those collective bargaining teams to the table to understand how they'd like to see things done or create committees with them and the school board. So as far as how that's going to impact me for policies or anything else, it doesn't. I mean, I plan to work with them if I'm elected, just the same if I'm not elected.
Same question, Mr. Maloney.
Well, I'll come out and say I was endorsed by both CSEA and WISTA, but I was very upfront and said it was no quid pro quo. So, and they kind of echoed the same thing to me, whether they endorsed me or not. And it's obvious, coming to the table, sometimes hard decisions are going to have to be made. However, I will always offer a seat at the table to anybody before a decision is made.
Very good. Mrs. Greenberg, endorsed or not, how would it impact your negotiating and in developing a budget?
Thank you for repeating the question. I am very happy to have received the endorsement of both CSEA and WISTA. And in our discussions, of course, we talked about, no quid pro quo. However, it's really important to make sure that we consider issues from all different stakeholders' positions. And in my daily life, I listen to people regularly. I make sure I bring key stakeholders to the table and look at problems from a variety of different perspectives, and it helps me to make sure I understand what the facts are as objectively as I possibly can, and try to look at issues from diverse perspectives. Teachers, custodial workers, before after school workers, lots of different folks who work in the schools. They spend more time with my child during the day than I do often. And so their perspective on what is happening in the school is really important, and I very much value it. And if elected to the school board, I would make sure that I listen to their perspective as I would listen to others' perspectives as well.
Very good. Mrs. Berlich?
Thank you. I am also very humbly endorsed by both of the unions. They've made it very clear, and I fully agree. This is a matter of bringing all the parties to the table and having all the constituents there to have their voice. I have learned so much through the interview process for the past 2 years when I was running last year as well. I was able to advocate just to my friends and to the community who may not have known, and it was just such a fun experience to learn so much about what they go through each and every day that I think the community is not aware of. So yeah, it's not going to it will not affect my objectivity when making decisions.
Mrs. Gates, whether you were endorsed or not, would it affect your negotiating contracts or developing a budget?
It would not affect my negotiating tactics, whether I was endorsed or not. I always, vote with integrity and with everybody's opinion in the back of my mind. My door is always open to speaking to all different constituents, and I have during this budget process. I was not endorsed by either union. I was informed by the West Seneca Teachers Association that I would not get their endorsement if I voted to approve the budget of the superintendent, and therefore I did not ask for their endorsement. As far as CSEA, they did reach out, but I felt that it wasn't in the best interest of both of us to seek an endorsement through them. It had been a very contentious, upsetting budget process, and I felt it was best to run on my own accord and let the will of the community vote. But I will say that, all constituents were invited to meetings, whether their view of being brought to the table is the same as mine or the same as our district office. That is a matter of opinion, and that's a matter of what you view as transparency, which seems to be in the eye of the beholder. So I think that answers your question, but no, it would never affect my decision making. I vote with integrity and ethics, and I will remain that way.
Thank you. I started writing down who was next, so I know now. So this is a question that happens all across the country, and it came in, and we're going to ask it, and you're going to start with it, Jeremy Maloney. What is your view on book bans?
On book bans, I would say as long as it's appropriate for the classroom and appropriate for the age level, I would be okay with the books. But obviously, over the past few years, it's been a hot topic, and sometimes something inappropriate does sneak in, and if that's the case, I think it needs to be addressed.
Thank you. Mrs. Greenberg, banning books or not?
I'm categorically opposed to banning any book. We entrust our teachers with our students, and we respect their judgment, and this is their professional judgment on a daily basis to uphold the state's curriculum and to make sure that they're having age-appropriate conversations that may have, be difficult conversations with children. And, this is something that I entrust to the teachers to determine what books are appropriate, what books are not appropriate, from an age-appropriate perspective. I also think that it's important for parents to be involved in their students' curriculum and their education, and to make sure that they are having those difficult conversations with students. And then finally, I would also say that, it's really important to make sure that, when you start banning books, you start silencing certain narratives, and that gets to be a really slippery slope pretty quickly. So it's important to make sure that, our students have a diverse variety of material that they can, that's available to them in the libraries.
Very good. Mrs. Verulich?
I agree with Ms. Greenberg. It's actually what I said last year. It's a very slippery slope. If you ban a single book, you open the door to ban any of them, and probably the ones that the people who banned that first one never meant to be banned. We have to trust our librarians. This is their profession. They are doing what's best for the children at age-appropriate levels. We spoke earlier about issues with students with depression, identity issues, and bullying. Again, I'll say it as a nurse, as a Girl Scout leader, as a volunteer in many organizations that works with children. Not everyone has parents that they can speak to. And sometimes those books that we may think are a little iffy are their only way to have an open door to their identity issues, to what's happening, to their questions, because they don't have a safe place at home. So, no book banning.
Very good. Thank you. Mrs. Gates?
Yes, I am also against banning books. I feel it is, if you want to start banning books, it's a slippery slope, and, you're going against the American College of Libraries and State Education Department. So I encourage parents to be involved in their students' lives. If you're concerned about the books they're reading, that's a conversation you should have with your parents. You should have with your child, and I also think that they can see worse things on their phone. So that's where I stand on that.
Thank you. Justin Smith?
Some of my thunder was stolen there. But I absolutely agree that, it's funny, this is actually a topic that was on John Oliver not too long ago, so I really enjoyed that segment on it. But I don't think any book should be banned. I do believe in age limits being put on books, and maybe special sections where you have a teen, tween, adult section. And I know that's not 100% accurate, but I don't think any book anywhere should ever be banned. I also think that we as parents, if we are active in our children's development, has a responsibility. I'm always asking my daughter what she's reading. My wife's always asking her what she's reading. So, and if it's something that seems kind of, that's a odd topic, tell me a little bit about it, and let's try to understand why. But I think absolutely what you touched on is anybody walking around one of these little babies is reading or seeing, doing things far worse than you're ever going to see in a book. So I think banning books is the least of our concerns.
Thank you. That brings us to the end of our questions that were sent in. We do have, I see a microphone up there, and I might see one over here, except the light's in my eyes, so I don't know if there is one. But if you would care to, there is one over there too. If you would care to just move into the aisle and maybe line up if there's somebody before you, but go ahead and take the mic, introduce yourself, and let us know what you're wondering about.
Only this mic right here on the ground. That's the one.
You would talk if you could go there.
Hi, thank you guys for coming today, and I'm really excited to ask my question. I'm Grace Vanderlip. I've been a resident of West Seneca my entire life. Proud daughter of Vincent Vanderlip, who is the current board member. So my question today is about how our district invests heavily in remedial programs. So what would you guys as board members do to enhance enrichment programs and enrichment opportunities for students who are in elementary schools? And I can repeat that if you need.
Yes, can you?
Repeat it? Yep. So our district invests heavily in remedial programming. What would you do to enhance enrichment opportunities for students who are in our elementary schools?
And I don't know if we continue to go in order, but if we would, then I think that it's Mrs. Greenberg.
Sure, happy to start with that. Thank you for the question. I think I heard the question is about what would you do to enrich opportunities in elementary schools? Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's fine.
Great, thank you. And so one of the things I would do is start by talking to the teachers about what's successful and what the students have enjoyed, and also what has been successful in terms of programs that the teachers have led. I would speak to the administration to understand what opportunities are available, and I would also look outside to different school districts and different programs to see what was successful at other similarly situated elementary schools.
Thank you. Mrs. Farrell, would you like to answer that question?
Yes, absolutely. So I was a former PTA member at Winchester Potters, and I got to work with the administration and the teachers very closely there. And it's important, first and foremost, to speak to the teachers. They know those kids better than anyone and what the needs are. And that might change from year to year and grade to grade. So it's going to start with speaking with the teachers and the principals and to see what is most needed in that building, as each of our elementary schools does have a different population based on their location. And I think we're very lucky that 2 of our schools are quite diverse. So those enrichment programs may look vastly different from some of the other schools.
Thank you. Mrs. Gates?
Yep. So I really like this question because enrichment is something that, I have been passionate about and tried to advocate for. My oldest son missed out on the enrichment opportunities because there was an enrichment program at West Elementary, and then it had to be eliminated the year before he became a 5th grader, I believe. So bringing that back would be a board goal, and we have actually stated it as one of our board goals and one of our questions on presentations to our curriculum director. We would love to bring back enrichment opportunities because we often talk about, remediation and like catching kids up, but we also have these pockets of students who are so intelligent that they're, bored in a class and they're kind of left to work on their own. So having those opportunities is so important. And so I know we have math club, but you're just having, I think, we used to have one of the teachers run the enrichment program at the elementary school, so bringing that back. But honestly, that all revolves around funding. Do we have the funding for that right now? And that will be a question for, the future board and the future superintendent. But I personally would love to see it happen.
Thank you. Mr. Smith?
I love enrichment too. So a few things around it. In particular, I don't think it has to cost a lot of money. And I think that we have a lot of the answers right in the school, and that's using the student body. All the clubs that we mentioned, math and everything else like that, why not create these curriculums within the student body where they can take that to the elementary school. One of the coolest things I have to say that happened at Queen of Heaven when my daughter attended it was they had what they called a buddy program. And that was a middle school, like an 8th grader was paired with a kindergarten. And it's so, as you moved up, 7th grader with 1st grader. So it was really cool that they had these buddies. They really enjoyed it. They got to, the older kids enjoyed working with the younger kids, and the younger kids enjoyed, having these buddies. And it gave them more exposure to, different topics and tutoring and capabilities. So I think one of the things I would look for is how can we, that there's all these academy programs for arts, for business, for computers, but there isn't one for teaching. So there's a great opportunity right there to expand, get the student body involved in mentoring and building the future student body up. So.
Very good. Mr. Maloney?
That's going to sound like I'm echoing everybody else, but I agree. It starts with the teachers. They're what we refer to as boots on the ground. So they're the ones that know what's best for all of the students So that's where I would start. And then obviously if, you hit a roadblock, you may have to look outside the district to get ideas from other areas. But it starts in-house and it starts with our teachers.
All right, that was full circle. If we don't, we have another audience question. Maybe one more after this and we'll get to the closing statements.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Cuss. A lot of people recognize me, but I am questioning the new candidates. How would you implement new change in regards to bullying and fighting? Because our code of conduct does not help the situation. You have kids and students fighting every time. They get suspended or detention and then go back to the school and repeat the situation over and over again.
So what is your question?
So how would you implement a new change or policy to impact the students for bullying or fighting in the schools?
This may go back to a question that you've already answered, but I'm going to ask you to address Mrs. Cuss directly. So starting with you, Mrs. Berlich.
I think it starts with the policies, because we do know that it's an issue in the schools. But we have to listen to the kids, listen to what they're saying and what they're not saying. I know that there's been students who have gone to their trusted adults and have not been listened to, and then they're the ones who are getting in trouble when they take the matter into their own hands to end what's happening. So policies do need to be looked at.
Mrs. Gates.
Yeah. So I think that obviously looking at our policy, comparing them to other districts, but I think what's really important to note is the implementation of the policy. We have to ensure, we are a big district, so we have to ensure the implementation of the policy, the regulations that follow that policy are put into practice consistently. So, maybe it's, another, review of the policy and, a meeting of the superintendent with administration. I mean, there are avenues through this. I don't think it's done out of I think it's not done out of ill intention. I think it's just, being consistent and following the rules and regulations of the policy, takes a lot of work and time and consideration. So I think that would be where I would start, is just reviewing it, comparing it to other districts, and making sure we're following it to the T.
Mr. Smith.
If policy doesn't work, I always say just replace it. So I don't know. I do know that there are a lot of different flavors of what bullying looks like. Like I said, I know, firsthand, my daughter went through it. I think training, not only the teachers, but students on what it is, and I know there are some programs already going on around that. I'm big on accountability buddies, so having some of those areas and programs in place where if you see something, say something. We always hear that all the time in any kind of ethical presentation, but I think that's the truth, and folks that do report that should be celebrated. But yeah, I think work probably does need to be done there. I have heard stories as well. And that is one of the areas I think the board should focus on in the coming year.
Thank you. Mr. Maloney.
I think what a lot of parents don't understand is a lot of times the stuff they're coming home and the information they're giving to them is not the information that they bring forward to the school. And it's very hard then for the school to investigate it. I think there are pretty decent policies in place, but policies, need to change from time to time. But that's where it's got to start. The conversation has to be that the students need to bring it forward to us, because most of the times there are instances where something comes out. It's something that we found out, this started a month ago, it started weeks ago, and now it's to the boiling point and something worse has happened. So kind of starts at home, where we need to tell these kids, hey, what you're telling me, you have to go in and you have to relate to the school. So.
Thank you. Mrs. Greenberg.
Yeah, I'll be brief because I agree with everything that's already been said. I think policies are definitely the starting point, but to the extent that there are policies already in place, it goes to the implementation and making sure that students have a safe and confidential way of coming forward to speak to a staff member and to bring their concerns forward, and that they're listened to and that they understand that they won't be retaliated against, or that their concerns will be taken seriously and will be, they will get, the attention and the relief that they're seeking.
Thank you. And now I believe we have Trustee Vanderlip with
Mr. Bradenstein. Go.
Pardon? Oh, Mr. Bredenstein. Sure.
Hi, good evening. Bob Bradenstein, lifelong West Seneca resident, retired career educator. First, thank you to all of the candidates for your courage in putting your name forward on the ballot. I understand the impact that has on you personally and your families, and I applaud your willingness to get involved and help solve some complicated problems in the community. My question revolves around capital project work, which hasn't been addressed tonight, and this will be millions of dollars of investment in our facilities, in our plant, our art centers, and our athletics. What is your plan to work with the superintendent and the community to put forward a successful capital project campaign to begin to address some of these issues without burdening the community too much? Thank you.
Thank you. That starts with you, Mrs. Gates.
It does? Okay. So the long and short answer is marketing. That's what I think. So the right kind of marketing, the right kind of information being presented to the community. We were heartbroken that the December capital project was not passed. However, only 1,800 voters showed up. So I think learning from that, sometimes the worst things that happen you learn the most from, and I think what we learned was how important it is to spread the word, to market it, to have public forums, and to garner support from the entire community, not just the student body, but the entire community. And yes, without a tax burden would be ideal for everybody. So I hope I answered your question, but yes, we should do better.
Mr. Smith.
Yeah, I think, for me, it's understanding how these capital projects are funded, in particular, because I know some comes in through grants, others come in through the tax revenue, and trying to understand how we prioritize those. Heck, if anybody goes to school board meeting and you use the facilities there, you can absolutely see that these schools definitely need some revitalization, to say the least. But I think once you understand that, I absolutely agree. I think it's a marketing roadshow that you take it out there at the school board, you show the pictures, you show the challenges. But I also think it's holding some of the folks to account too. If you have students damaging property or being destructive, then they should be financially accountable for fixing that, or the parents. So I think it's a two-way street on a lot of that stuff. That it's one of the things the military always taught me, and being a homeowner has taught me, is you take care of what's yours. So I think that's a two-way street from the students, faculty, and the folks in those buildings.
Thank you, Mr. Maloney.
I'll agree with the marketing aspect, as we'll call it. I feel there should be numerous public forums when there's going to be that much money spent, and give everyone the information that we have at hand as far as conditions of the buildings, the reason why those choices are being made at that particular time for the capital improvements, as well as explaining the entire budget process for the capital improvement.
Okay, Mrs. Greenberg.
Thank you. I don't have much to add. I think it goes to the explainability, making sure that you're making the right trade-offs, you're understanding where the money is coming from, what it's going to, and if there are any trade-offs that would need to be made as a result, making sure you're bringing the right stakeholders in, and then, of course, explaining it. And as my colleague said, marketing it, which is a great term, but making sure that that you explain it to people and that they understand, what the benefits are.
Thank you, Mrs. Barlich.
So as a supporter and advocate of the arts, we're the creatives who are used to fighting for every dollar, fighting to be seen. we were forced to become the critical thinkers, the dreamers, the outside the box thinkers, all the solutions that no one else thought of. Grants, we had to learn how to write grants. Honestly, my vision would be special events that bring in revenue, other things that bring in revenue. I know it was brought up about the auxiliary gym over at West, that there was a potential opportunity to put turf in there, of which we would be a standout in Western New York that could bring money in. So I don't understand why capital projects wouldn't look at, from the flip side, to be a revenue raiser, if you will, rather than just an expense on our community.
All right, well, it looks like we've gotten to the end of our program unless,
Yep.
do you have a question there, Trustee Vanderlip? You want to bat cleanup tonight? Okay, here it comes.
First of all, I just want to echo Mr. Bridenstine's applause to each of you for entering this forum, putting your name in there, and being involved. You're all very great people and quality people, and I look forward to working with any one of you who come onto the board. And especially sitting in that hot seat tonight, but I do warn you that that seat will feel like a comfy old recliner compared to sitting on the board, because the decisions that we make are monumental and life-changing. And I'm sure you've given that every bit of thought in entering this. So my question is this. It comes to decision making, and it comes to, I heard the word transparency and accountability. So what I would like you to do is actually define what that means to you and how you believe that you're going to be able to illustrate those qualities as board members.
That starts with you, Mr. Smith.
That's a great one. So transparency, say what you do and do what you say. That is, I think, the most simplistic way to look at that. I also think it's key, and this is how I arrived at, sharing with everybody, this is how I arrived at the decision and what I took into consideration. And you may not like it. Hopefully you do. If you don't, well, I mean, this is how I got there. And I said it on my bio earlier. I'm not just a yes vote. If it's something that doesn't feel right, I have no problem being a no in a room full of yes. I'm just hoping that I maybe can persuade a few more of those yes votes to say, hey, you know what, this probably does need a little bit more research, and then take it from there. But
Okay,
that's what I got.
Mr. Maloney?
So transparency to me is giving out all the information to all the stakeholders. I understand at times there will be confidential information that can't be given out, but everyone that a decision is going to affect should have a voice. And regardless if it's a 3 or 4 hour meeting you got to sit through or 300 phone calls you got to take, you need to allow everyone to have a voice. And as far as accountability, I kind of stand behind the statement I made earlier. If somebody brings to the table that what they're giving to the board is something that they already have a plan in place for, and it's not going to affect the budget, and then the day comes and it does affect the budget, that's where we hold people accountable. Or, department heads are making decisions which then cause grievances for the union and it costs the district more money. We need to hold those department heads accountable for what their decisions they're making, because at the end of the day, all it's doing is costing us more money.
Thank you. Mrs. Greenberg?
Thank you. So transparency to me means active listening and making sure that you're meeting with the right folks. You're looking at problems and issues from a lot of diverse perspectives. You're asking the right questions and trying to arrive at an objective conclusion at the end of the day, and then showing your work. Being clear and being able to explain how you arrived at that conclusion to the extent possible, holding those meetings in public, and making sure that the public has an opportunity to see behind the curtains of how the decisions are made. The board meetings are public. And so to me, that's what transparency means. And then accountability is leading with integrity and doing the right thing and standing by the decisions you've made.
Thank you. Mrs. Berlich?
Thank you. To go back to art and my teachers that taught me in elementary school, transparency are my glasses. I can see through them. I know what's happening. As a leader, I know that I cannot be transparent about everything, but transparency through high-performing teams has really taught me, and with my work, what can be said needs to be said and shared. It needs to be shared so that input can happen and feedback. But obviously, there's going to be confidential items that cannot be shared. But transparency is not through the eye of the beholder. It's a fact. It's what we can see. Accountability is, as she mentioned, it's integrity. It's leading with that integrity, doing what you say you're going to do, and really bringing everyone to the table so that the decisions that are being made, that you are taking into consideration the upstream and downstream effects of them, and being accountable to all constituents, the taxpayers, the students, the teachers, parents, everyone.
Thank you. Mrs. Gates.
Okay, so accountability. It starts with holding yourself accountable. That's what I believe. Making decisions with integrity, as was mentioned several times. Without special interest groups, coming into your ear. I feel like making informed decisions, asking the right questions, holding yourself accountable, and then holding all those around you accountable. The board has one employee, the superintendent. Hold the superintendent accountable, and then their responsibility is to hold their administrative staff accountable. So that is how I view accountability. And transparency, you have to share as much information as you can and make it in a digestible format, which we try to do in our Board of Education newsletters because school board budgets are extremely complicated. So share as much information as you can over and over and over. I mean, we do get feedback. There's a bit of information overload from people, so we do try our best, but, bring everyone to the table, listen to various voices, and make decisions that with the information that you have, make the best decision. And that's what I think transparency is.
All right, we've reached the portion of the evening where our candidates will make their closing statements. And because we started at this end of the table with Mrs. Gates, we will now start at the far end with Mrs. Barlich.
Thank you. I've been at the past few board meetings, as I think many of you have, and certainly those watching from home. And it's been said a few times that they hope the new superintendent is able to restore trust in the district and in the faculty, the staff, the teachers, and the students. But hope is not a policy. It's really important that we stand up, as I've said numerous times, that it takes a village to raise the kids. It's our neighbors, it's our friends. They are the ones working in these schools. This election, is it just about money? Or is it about an insulting part that you can put a price on having your kids to feel safe, seen, and secure while they're in school to learn? So I just ask everyone to please come out and vote next Tuesday to act to restore leadership to the board and set an example for our kids, because they're our future. Thank you.
Okay, Mrs. Greenberg.
Thank you. I just want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. And for those of you who listened online, I really appreciate all of the time and energy you spent listening to the candidates to make an informed decision. I am ready to hit the ground running, working on day one. I am ready to be an active listener, to make sure that I'm listening to all of the stakeholders and to make sure that I am asking the right questions and challenging the status quo to make sure that we collectively as a board arrive at the right conclusion. So again, I would like to thank everybody for your time, and I encourage everybody to come out and vote next Tuesday.
Thank you. Mr. Maloney.
Service to my community is something I've done my entire adult life, first in the military, then youth sports, now as a police officer. So if elected, I will continue this service by serving on the school board. My goal if elected is to increase transparency, accountability, and get the budget under control. I believe we all want to improve our students' educations and create or bring back clubs, programs. However, none of this is possible if we don't have the funds. When making financial decisions, we need to look at the long-term impact and not just the impact today. We must ensure that the decisions made don't create an undue burden on our taxpayers. In closing, I feel in service transparency is a huge factor. So I'm going to be completely transparent to everyone here and everyone watching. Being a police officer, I had an additional hurdle to get over in order to run for the seat. I had to request permission from the town board, which I did, and it was approved unanimously. Can't even speak. However, since then, there's been select individuals who behind the scenes have tried to get me to remove my name from the ballot and have even gone as far as threatening the SRO program. So if you're watching, I just want to make it clear that if I'm elected, my term will not begin until July 1st. And as of June 27th, my assignment goes from SRO back to patrol officer.
Very good.
Well, that's horrible.
Mr. Smith, yes, this is it. It's your closer.
Yeah, I know. That's a tough one to follow. Nobody should be threatened like that, especially the SRO program. I think that's very important to the schools. My closing's simple. Really, vote for change is kind of what I think you've heard four new folks talk about how they would approach the school board. I think they're all fresh, fantastic points of view and something that should be considered. I ran this year, basically because I was disheartened what happened with the layoffs. I was disheartened, we started talking about redistricting and that just stopped. I think that we can do better as a community for our students, our teachers and faculty. Get out and vote. I'm not going to say the school budget's a great option, but I can tell you that there's a far worse option if it's not approved. So I would definitely encourage folks to consider that when they're voting. And then, for the school board, look for fresh ideas.
Thank you, Mrs. Gates. Your closing statement, please.
Thank you. You said I have 2 minutes for this?
You get 3 minutes.
Oh, I do. Okay, excellent. So thank you for everyone for coming out tonight. Thank you for the questions, and I hope you've gathered some important information here tonight to solidify your vote on May 21st. I just wanted to point out that I've sat on this board for 3 years, and a lot of talk, tonight has been on the budget, but I just ask you not to forget the body of work that this board has done for 3 years, and especially under mine and Molly's term. We ran on the initiative to make sure our kids were back in school full time, and we made sure that happened. We valued transparency because we saw, backdoor, closed door meetings happen, where consensus was garnered via phone call and not in an open, transparent manner. And we've worked so hard to make sure that all board members have a voice. Whether we agree or we disagree, all board members have the same amount of information and are allowed to make an informed decision. So I just ask you to please look back at the body of work we've done, how hard we've worked for this district, how many hours we've put in, and to just see that the end was always in mind. The vision was always in mind. Every decision we made was with the long-term vision of this district. So I'm going to speak to the vision because nobody asked that question, which I hope they were going to, but our vision was and still is providing a world-class education while remaining fiscally responsible. A challenging task, but it can be achieved with great leadership. I would love to support Dr. Kruger in making West Seneca a destination district, a phrase she used in her interview with the board that has stayed with us. That's the dream. I hope I can be a part of that reality. I do think it's possible. We have amazing people in this district, amazing leaders, staff, parents, community members. We just all need to come together and work as a team. So that would be, my closing statement. I just hope you come out and vote. Please, we need our numbers to get higher, and I also want to echo Justin's statement that, I hope you support this budget because the contingent budget is another would be heartbreaking for us as a board and for as a community. So please come out and vote, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. With that, I would like to, on behalf of the district, thank everyone who's here and everyone watching online for being with us tonight. This is important work in a school district. Thank you to our candidates, both for agreeing to run for the board and for being with us tonight for this important conversation.
Thank you.
Sure.